In this episode of My Words, My Book, we have Lanisha Butterfield. Lanisha is a children's picture book author who published her first book last year. Flower Block is a modern-day Jack and the Beanstalk set in a tower block, illustrated by Giang. The story harnesses the power of love and nature in bringing communities together. Born and raised in social housing, she's passionate about telling stories about normal characters and reminding children from lesser heard backgrounds that they deserve magic and fairy tales too. So, Lanisha, why did you become an author?
Honestly, because I love books. It sounds really cliche, but I just always loved books and I've always loved reading since I was little. And on my lunch breaks, I'd kind of go into bookshops and look at all of the latest releases, particularly inclusive fiction. I've just always loved how 32 pages, little pages, can potentially change somebody's whole perspective on life. And I thought one day, let me try and write something. So I did a course with Puffin during COVID. It was a virtual course, 15 women, us, hosted by Alan Durant, the author. And I just wanted to learn more about the craft. And it was over 2 days. And on the second day, we wrote short stories, which we read aloud to Alan and Dapo Adiola and the publishing director of Puffin. And then I'd written this outline story for Flower Block, and it just turned out that they liked it. So my journey to being an author was by happenstance more than like I was intent on getting published. I just love writing for myself. I never imagined that anyone would actually want to read anything I wrote.
That's amazing. And how did you come to find out about the program that Puffin put on?
Somebody at my workplace is a writer for adult fiction, and I told her I'm interested and wanted to learn more. And she told me to hunt out development opportunities and told me to look up that one, which I did, which I don't think it's running anymore. But yeah, I found it on their website and bought it for myself, and it was probably the best money I've ever spent.
Fantastic. And I think as well, children, to make a note of this, there are many competitions as well that children can, that the 500 words competition, you enter and you never know what can happen. You can become a published author like Lanisha as well.
That's it. Lots of people have asked me, how did you do it? How did you do it? And I feel like there's no set way, just have a go, and you've got to be, if you don't try, then that's the only way you can't succeed.
And there's a story within all of us. Everyone has a story to share.
Absolutely.
And what is your favourite children's book that you have read, either as a child or as an adult?
I have several, but as a child, my favorite children's book was Princess Smarty Pants by Babette Cole, which is about a princess who they want her to get married and she doesn't want to, and she wants to stay with her animals. And I just remember reading it and feeling that it was a very special story. It was really unique, a really independent princess, and just it had a very positive message that I hadn't heard before. And I generally liked Babette's approach. Again, I feel like it was the beginnings of inclusive fiction before they really called it that. And then my favorite gift to give my friends who've had children and all the children in my life is a book called I Like Myself by an author called Karen Beaumont. I just think I love the message. It's really positive and uplifting and great for self-esteem. And I love to read it to them and to myself when I need it.
And I always say children's books are for adults as well.
Definitely.
They're for everybody to enjoy a great story. So the Flower Block, here we are,
Yeah.
which is illustrated by the amazing Jiang.
Yep. Super amazing.
So do you want to tell the children more about this amazing, I mean, I just love the cover.
Oh, yeah.
Look at this cover. It's just beautiful.
She did such a wonderful job with it. So Flower Block was a story that lived in my heart for a long time before it came to life. And when I was matched with Jiang as my illustrator, I wasn't sure. You never know, and it was also my first time. You never know how an illustrator is going to interpret your vision. And when I saw the first colours, I was blown away. Like, there were things that she'd captured that hadn't even told her. It was just that we were very connected on the story. I think she was equally passionate about it as I was, even things like, I'm from a council estate in Oxford called Wood Farm, which has a tower block called Forester's Tower, which is that terracotta colour. And when I saw what Giang had done, I was like, the tower block I based it on looks exactly the same. And there's no way she would have known that because she's from Vietnam. And so it was one of those things that's just meant to be.
It's a beautiful book.
Thank
So
you.
in terms of a summary of a book, do you want to go into Flower Book a bit more in detail and share the magic of the story?
So as you said, Flower Block is a modern day Jack and the Beanstalk set in a tower block, but on a deeper level, it's a story about a little boy who's our Jack, Jeremiah, and he's just lost his dad and he's feeling that pain of grief. And to make himself feel better, he's decided to grow some sunflower seeds, which were his dad's favorite flower, and to have that connection. Me personally, I've lost a few people in my life, as I know lots of people have, and my way of feeling close to them and making myself feel better is to grow beautiful flowers for them and like go into beautiful gardens. And I kind of wanted to get that in the story. Jeremiah plants the sunflowers, and overnight they shoot into a giant beanstalk, which takes him on this adventure through the block where he meets up with his neighbors and they're trying to find the top of the tower. It was really important to me. Living in social housing, you don't often hear people say nice things about where you live, your neighbors, or your community. And personally, I just get a bit sick of it. And I always felt that if I wanted to write a story that was positive, was joyful about that kind of environment, especially a tower block, post Grenfell, some of the horrible things that were said about that, I just think sickened me. And I just really wanted to do something that would help to change the narrative. So here we have a block of people who come from all walks of life, all kinds of families, all kinds of jobs, or body type representation. The only steer I ever gave to Jiang when it came to illustration beyond character profiles was I just want it to be a stereotype-free zone. Joy needs to like beam off the page, and just I want everyone to be able to look at it and see themselves. And that's what we tried to achieve. And then the secondary theme is, of course, is another social housing theme, access to nature in social housing. Tower blocks, you don't often have a garden, or definitely, and often you can't even go on the roof. But if you live in a luxury block, you get a rooftop garden, you can always go on the roof. And I hate that double standard. And you're always told, oh, it's health and safety. But if you can do it for one group, you should be able to do it for another. And nature isn't this exclusive commodity. Everybody should be able to enjoy it. And that's what we wanted in the story. And then the final theme is our giant, Mr. Crisp, who's the elderly man on the top floor. And that was another theme really close to me because I've always been someone who likes to adopt neighborhood grandpas. I love to hang out with my neighbors and go and I had a neighbor, I used to love to go and sit with him and have a Mellow Birds coffee and watch snooker and just soak up time with them and enjoy their company. And I wanted Jeremiah to be somebody that appreciated the older generation and to show them as people that you can be friends with. You don't have to be somebody that's afraid to say hello.
That's beautiful. I just, everything that you've shared, it resonates with myself because I was raised in a council estate. It
Yeah.
wasn't a tower block. We had four different levels, but there were tower blocks on the estate as well. And I think in many children's books, we don't see social housing. We always see there's a house. We don't see other communities. For instance, the Gypsy Roma travel community, they're not featured within children's books. I think it is super important that this is what you've written about, that many children will be able to identify with. And then you mentioned Grenfell as well. I was raised in the Grenfell area, London W10. And initially we lived opposite Grenfell before we moved to another part of West London. And those themes, children will be able to read the book and say, well, this is me, this is where I live.
Yeah.
And then your other point that you made, Lanisha, I think about not being able to have access to the top. In London, near the American Embassy, there is an open air swimming pool that goes across to apartment blocks.
Right next to Puffin HQ.
That's right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't think it's open air, but then again, I think, as you so rightly said,
The Sky Pool.
yes, and how we see, I think, the other point that you referenced there, for me, is around working class characters. And I know in my book, which you've shared with me before, in Myra Marley, The Great
Oh,
Big
yeah.
Tidier,
Love that book.
well, I have included street sweepers.
Yep.
Because again, where do we see working class characters, which is super important for all children, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think people, there's a stigma around social housing. Oh, no one works. Oh, well, you get what you're given. It's like, actually, most of the people in my neighborhood, and I'm sure where you grew up, worked really hard, had all kinds of jobs. My mum's a single parent nurse. Jeremiah's dad in the story is a fireman. His mum's a nurse. You know, it's just, these are the jobs that are sort of the backbone of our society. And I think it was about time that we were celebrating them.
Absolutely. So what's your favourite page in the book? I'm sure, because every page is amazing. Is there a page that you think, oh, I love this page?
It's very difficult, but I think mine are they're two spreads. One of them is the vertical page, which looks up the block and is kind of just a representation of the inside of the block and what everybody's doing in their flats. I really like it because it's just like we were saying about normal people doing normal things and the joy that comes from the everyday. And the second page that I love is the final spread, which is when they go up to the roof garden and you see the community coming together and just how this simple thing, which really shouldn't be magical, having access to a garden, has transformed all of their lives and how they interact with each other. And on the page, you've got joy coming from people meeting up and having a cake, but then you've also got some sadness with the family. It's a memorial garden, so they're there celebrating their loved ones, but turning that into a joyful moment. My catchphrase for the book is that magical things happen when we plant seeds of love, and I think that can be true of how we interact with the world in general, with everyone.
And I like what you said there about the memorial garden, and I think that's important to children who may have suffered loss, that they have their own special ways of remembering their loved ones. I know some children do a memory box, as you say, some children plant seeds for this to be either a plant or a flower. And I think that's just a really good way of sharing different ways how we can celebrate the lives of others who have meant something beautiful to us.
Celebrate and say their name and say it
Absolutely.
proudly. Like when it comes to grief, sometimes it can feel like it's a bad word and you're not really allowed to say, I've lost someone that I adored and never wanted to be without, and I don't really know what to do with that. And some of my events I've been to, kids have told me that whether it's I miss my grandma, or I miss my dad, or I miss my cat, like they've experienced that loss, and it's nice for them to just be able to express it without feeling like they've done something wrong.
Absolutely. So what question would you ask yourself about the flower block?
Well, that's a hard one. What would I ask myself? Probably, what do you want people? Why do you, like what my nephews asked me about it? They flicked through it the first time. They were like, "But why did you do this? Why? What's the point of it?" And I think every writer writes for a different reason. But for me, when it comes to Flower Block, I wrote it just hoping it would make people be a bit kinder to each other and have a little bit more empathy for people that aren't like them. And also that people that do live in those situations feel a bit more seen. Like, my kind of dream is that when people drive past a tower block, rather than tutting and saying some horrible stereotype, they look at it and see a giant sunflower block through the middle and just imagine
So
our story.
changing minds and hearts as well, Lanisha.
Yeah.
And what do you want children to learn from this book? If you was to say to, to children, what do you want them to learn and to understand about the flower block?
I think probably what we all want as authors, just that magic is all around, that they and their lives and their communities can be magical, and that any house can be magical. And like I said before, that they deserve magic. Growing up, I read things like The Tiger Who Came to Tea and The Secret Garden, and they were lovely, lovely stories, but you're told you can have this magical adventure if your uncle's got an estate in the country, or the tiger's going to come and have tea with you if you've got a townhouse in Mayfair. And through the stories that I write, I just want to represent regular people and let them know anything is possible with imagination.
And that's a great point to finish on, that anything is possible for all children, irrespective of where they live and where they're from.
Or what their family looks like.
Exactly, and what their family looks like. Absolutely. So that's an excellent point, I think, to finish on. So thank you, Lanisha.
Thank you for having me.
No, you're welcome. And you can read The Flower Block. And I always say, remember to use your local library if you can. Please, please, please use your local library because it's free. And I always say, as Claudia and Tess say at the end of Strictly Come Dancing, they say, keep dancing. I always say, keep reading.
Keep reading. Love that.
This podcast was woven in partnership with our friends at Tapestry, the childhood education platform. They have kindly devised the educational resources for each podcast interview. Tapestry helps you celebrate children's learning, improve communication with families, and streamline your admin with powerful booking, invoicing, and management tools, giving you more time for what matters, the children and you. Visit tapestry.info to find out more. This podcast series was recorded at the Quick Brown Fox Video Production Studios in Wandsworth Town, London, with top-notch equipment and a knowledgeable team who are always happy to help. Recording our podcast has been a breeze.